as was said, I have been to speak here at Brighton quite a few times in recent years, and it's great to be back here again in the city to see lots of familiar faces and lots of new faces as well. So it's great to be back here. I am, as was said by the chair, I am a journalist, and I've been writing about the Israel lobby for quite a while. And it was one of the things I've been saying in recent years is, I think like most people who write about the pro-Israel lobby, I never set out to write about the pro-Israel lobby. It's foisted itself upon me because I became a campaigner for Palestinian rights, and because I started visiting Palestine as an activist in my 20s. And once I came back here to London, where I live, I started to talk, do talks and events at the request of local groups of what I'd seen in the West Bank and the abuses of human rights. And every time you try to do that, there would always be one or two, a small number of Zionist troublemakers, let's say, who would turn up and try and spoil events. People like we've written about in the past, people like Jonathan Hoffman and the scion of a famous clothing company, Richard Millard. I know Tony is very familiar with them as well. They, who tried to disrupt events. They weren't just coming along to make themselves, to participate in the debate. They were just trying to disrupt events. And so you start trying to learn about these issues and trying to learn about, well, who are these people? Who are these groups? Who is the Zionist Federation? So on and so forth. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I have I wrote this book. It was published last year. And it was really kind of the culmination of all my reporting about the issue of the campaign of deception within the Labour Party over alleged anti-Semitism and really fake anti-Semitism in the Labour Party to really derail Jeremy Corbyn. When there was a brief hope during those years for there to be some kind of different leadership within the Labour Party and in the opposition, and potentially in a future government. And what I found was really interesting. So I put together all kinds of different things. I want to talk today just very briefly about my experience with Unite, the trade union specifically. Obviously, Unite is, I believe, the second biggest trade union now. Unison's the biggest, right? Yeah, Unite is the second biggest trade union in the country. And so, therefore, in those years, the Jeremy Corbyn years, Unite activists were a very important source for me. People would often contact me, reach out to me. Sometimes I'd end up talking to them, reaching out to them. And normal members of Unite, grassroots members of Unite were saying, well, this is happening. All of a sudden, we've been accused of anti-Semitism, but all we said was that, we wanted Jeremy Corbyn and we don't believe that he's anti-Semitic, things along all those sorts of lines. So all the way through those years, 2015 to 2020, we could say, grassroots members of Unite were always important sources for me. And, you can read about some of them in the book. But also, I'm not at liberty to name names, but there was a few very senior people in the hierarchy of Unite who were also privately sympathetic to me and would be my sources as well. And in those years, since then, after the defeat of Corbynism as a political force, that has changed. And there was the purge from the Labour Party. And now I'm very much persona non grata. So I want to talk a little bit about what happened last year within Unite and how Unite effectively banned my book from its premises. And this is, of course, the leadership, namely Sharon Graham. And then after that, I'm going to get onto something I rarely do in talks, which is an exclusive news story for you here tonight.
That's exciting.
Well, I'm sure many of you will be familiar. What happened last year? This was in July 2023. So the publication date for my book was April, and my publisher, All Books, is a small radical publisher based in New York, and it's not Penguin Books, right? They did a great job, but they're not one of these corporate monoliths that has endless budget. But they did organise a book launch for me in London, so that was good. But then very soon after that, I had mostly trade unionists actually and Palestine solidarity campaigners come up to me and say, "Well, can you come to our town? Can you come to our city and speak about, sell the book, talk about your book, and we'll have a debate. We want to have a debate and a discussion with our members about what happened. Where did Corbynism go wrong? Where did all this anti-Semitism, false allegations come from? Have a real discussion." And that's what I did. I ended up going on a book tour last year around the UK, and it was the UK because it was Wales, Scotland, and England, not the north of Ireland, unfortunately. Maybe next time. So I came. One of the stops was Bristol, and what happened was it was Bristol. So the activists who invited me and organised these things were quite often people from the Unite community branch, right? So Unite community members would often all be the ones organising this meeting. It was usually a local pro-Palestinian group or Unite community. And in Bristol, the people who got together to organise this meeting actually managed to book it at Tony Benn House in Bristol, which is the local and regional headquarters of Unite the Union. This was done in July. A month later, I believe it was the 22nd of July, the story here that I've got, that my colleague at the Electronic Intifada, Ali Abou wrote about, reported on the cancellation. What happened was the event was cancelled at the last minute, about I think only 2 or 3 days before it was due to go ahead. And this is quite often what happens. There won't be objections raised till the last minute, and then they say, "Oh, you've got an anti-Semite book to speak at your event, at your venue. You have to cancel it." And people quite often get scared, and they fold and they cancel the venue. What happened? We discovered was the local staff at Unite were in the Tony Benn House, were all on board. They were very sympathetic. They wanted it to go ahead, and they were actually trying to stop any kind of cancellation from taking place. We soon discovered that the instruction to cancel the event came from the top, namely the General Secretary, Sharon Graham, as well as her deputy, Gail Cartmel. And it was, correspondence was entered into between the local Unite members who had organised the event in Bristol and the staff and leadership of Unite to clarify, because it was a dual event, right? The film, Oh, Jeremy Corbyn, The Big Lie, was also going to be shown that night. And there was a correspondence entered into, because the film had also been banned. They wanted to clarify, well, okay, is the issue also over Asa's book? And what was said was, in an email from Gail Cartmel, their reason for cancelling the event was the contents of my book are inflammatory, number one, and secondly, Asa Winstanley's publication has already caused deep hurt amongst Jews in Britain. So, I don't know about you, but I think the role of real journalism is to be inflammatory. It is to cause a discussion. It is to kind of try and raise awareness. And, don't have to agree with everything in the book, but it can surely be discussed and debated and talked about. So, and for a trade union of all organisations to try and to effectively ban the book from its premises, and they tried to say, it wasn't banned because there's other venues where they can go and see it. We've just decided not to use our premises. Okay, well, trade unions have got a right to decide what they have on their premises, but also the trade union surely belongs to its members and not just the leadership. And so, there was a lot of fuss caused about it in the union, in the grassroots. There was a lot of objections about it, and people did write in, and they said people actually cancelled their membership of the union as well, which I didn't ask people to do, but people were doing that themselves. So long story short, the event did go ahead, but not at Tony Benn House. The organisers had to find another venue locally in Bristol, and it was fairly well attended. But it would have been good to have it in the actual union headquarters, because there would have been a different audience. Perhaps more trade unionists would have come along. There could have been more plurality in the discussion, and more debate could have gone on. So these things, these kind of political censorship, do have an effect, and so that's where things stood. Now, in September last year, at the request of, the suggestion of a comrade whose name slips my mind. It may have been you, actually, Tony. I put in a subject access request. Did you suggest that?
Yeah.
You did? Okay. Tony's taking credit. I put in a subject access request. So I was, probably some of you know, under freedom of information law, you have the right to write into any organisation and see what data they hold on you. So this could be a good way of getting information out of organisations, because under the law they have to reveal that information. So I put a subject access request. I asked for everything, all correspondence between Gail Cartmel and also Sharon Graham, and any pro-Israel organisations. Basically, I asked for everything they had on me, anything that named me, and I said specifically this kind of stuff. Because one of the things that actually emerged soon after this cancellation was that a pro-Israel organisation called the Campaign Against Antisemitism, which, as Tony has accurately put it in one of his articles for the Electronic Intifada, is actually a campaign against Palestinians. It's not a campaign against anti-Jewish prejudice of any kind. It's actually a campaign against Palestinians, because that's the main thing that it campaigns on. This organisation, soon after my book event in Bristol was cancelled, claimed credit. They said they'd entered into correspondence with Unite, and it was basically down to them. So in the subject access request, so under the law, they've got a month to respond to my request, either to give me the disclosures that I asked for, or to give a valid reason as to why they haven't got it. So when I put this in was actually the 7th of September last year, and then they did get back to me, and they did actually give me a subject access request, which I've got here, and it's 1,000 pages long, 1,042 pages long. So interestingly, now it may have been a coincidence, it may have been cynical timing, I'm not sure. When they gave me this subject access request was on the 9th of October last year. At the time, I obviously, as a reporter on Palestine, I had other priorities. I didn't really read the PDF. I thought that's very sneaky. They put this now when there's a genocide kicking off in the Gaza Strip. I just filed it away on my desktop. But this week, I started to look at what they sent me, because I thought it would be interesting in the light of this meeting and the subject of this meeting. I haven't had a chance to go through most of it, but I read the first 150 pages, and it was all, except for one cross DM direct message on social media that wasn't very happy about me, but wasn't specifically complaining about the book. I don't know, it was a bit vague. See, all these emails are redacted. It's mostly redacted. Obviously, personal information is redacted and so on and so forth. And some of it just seems to be half redacted. But the first 150 pages or so was complaints, very clearly was complaints from Unite Party members, Unite trade unionists, grassroots members, cancelling their membership or in some cases cancelling their membership, but all of them complaining about the censorship and the ban on the book and on the film, Oh, Jeremy Corbyn, The Big Lie. So that was the first 150 pages or so. But I thought, I'm not going to have time to read this whole thing. So I went from the end of the document, and I found something very interesting, which was that not only did the Campaign Against Antisemitism had complained and complained about the book event, but so did the Jewish Labour Movement. And I've got this letter from them here, which you can see. And as I said, I haven't reported on this yet, so tonight is an exclusive. I'll probably write about it in due course, but it's very interesting. So essentially, obviously, if you're not familiar, the Jewish Labour Movement is, again, it's a misnamed organisation, like the Campaign Against Antisemitism. It'd be more accurately titled the Zionist Labour Movement, because it is a pro-Israel organisation, an anti-Palestinian organisation. I've reported about that in some detail in the book. But what they're saying in the letter is, following our previous correspondence, it doesn't obviously who they're writing to is blanked out, but I assume it's Sharon Graham. Following our previous correspondence, we are writing in good faith to express our disappointment that a Unite branch is hosting Asa Winstanley, a well-known supporter and propagator of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, on the 24th of July, which has just come to our attention. Interestingly, this was written 3 days before my event was due to take place. So again, last minute thing. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. They're complaining about my book, Weaponising Antisemitism. And an example of my so-called antisemitism, they say, in his book, Winstanley repeats and defends the monstrous assertion made by Ken Livingstone that Zionist Jews collaborated with the Nazis. Quote, and this is an accurate quote from my book, Zionist leaders were explicitly comparing their own movement to Nazism, he writes, adding that there is, quote, a degree of ideological affinity between the Nazis and Zionism. That's also an accurate quote. If you want to know that, yes, I did write that because it's accurate. And if you want to know more about that, Tony's got an excellent book on the subject, which is also for sale here tonight. So, yeah, basically what they're saying is that the concluding paragraph, we would ask that, given all this, you would intervene to ensure that Unite's name is not associated with Winstanley and any promotion of his racist publication. We would, of course, be happy to discuss this in more detail with yourself and all colleagues, if this would be helpful. So, just finally, this was really interesting. This is the most interesting thing I've found in it so far, because what it shows is that if you say, so one of the other things they were complaining about, sorry, I should actually quote this as well. They also complain about, quote, his theories about an Israel lobby, which they put in square quotes, in this country, which exists only to do the work of the Israeli government. We hope that we do not need to point out this is an anti-Semitic trope. So they're saying it's anti-Semitic to say that there's an Israel lobby at the same time that they are lobbying for Israel. And this is the perfect example. And of course, they didn't do this letter publicly. The so-called campaign against anti-Semitism did boast about it openly, right? But the Jewish Labour Movement, ostensibly this, Labour movement, right? They're trying to be a little bit more cautious and they didn't post this letter publicly. This is being done behind the scenes. This is being done covertly. Dare I say it, they were conspiring to stop me from having a book launch on Unite premises. And more importantly, rather than just my individual case, they were trying to stop the issue of weaponized anti-Semitism being discussed openly in public fora amongst trade unionists. And this is the kind of thing that I think we need, that Palestine Solidarity campaigns are one of the problems that they're facing all around the world, and it becomes a real issue and a real problem. That's the subject of the book. Those are my experiences within Unite. In a nutshell, there's more about it in the book. But, I've got to say, I could not have followed this story for so long if it wasn't for ordinary people like you, who had carried on and kept saying, this is happening to us, it's not fair, it's unjust. We need someone to speak out about it. And I think we all should not be cowed, and we should not be afraid of calling these things out for what they are, which is bad faith smear campaign. So thank you for this.